Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Tom Morris is our guest. He's a television engineer with radio experience, and he's here to talk about when things get complicated with bringing in somebody else to fix a system, a complicated system, how you might want to trust but verify what they've done, because they may leave more problems than they've solved. That's coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics, with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. By Nautel, worry-free transmission you can count on with outstanding control, reliability, efficiencies, and Nautel's unmatched 24/7 customer support. Online at nautel.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. It's the show where we talk about everything from this microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host here in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee, and delighted to be here on this first day of February. Tomorrow's Groundhog Day. We'll have to see what happens and see if we get, what's the meme going around? 2 more weeks of Taylor Swift? I'm not sure what it is. But Chris Tarr is here. He's a football fan, aren't you? Hi, Chris.
I am. Oh, yeah. I'm a football fan. I'm a Taylor Swift fan. And rumor has it, if the groundhog sees its shadow, it's 4 more weeks of winter or a month. If it doesn't, I think is how that works. Anyway,
I thought it was 6 weeks, but
welcome.
I don't know.
6 weeks and a month and a half, either one.
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm here in the Chris Tarr Alliance studio here in beautiful Mugwanago, Wisconsin, where it's actually gotten nice after, I think January was one of the coldest Januaries on record. Today, the sun is shining. It's 45 degrees. And it's a nice little break from the gray skies and the snow and the cold we've had, the past few weeks.
Yeah, indeed. It's warmer here. It still can't shake the chill off. It started this morning out at about 29, 30 degrees or so. So it started out cold today. All I know is the natural gas meter is still going every once in a while when the furnace comes on. So
we got our first bill for this past month.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was. Man. It's crazy dumb. It's like $300. Something like that.
Oh, wow.
Which is insane.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane.
Mine was about 200, but wow. Well, Chris and I are here, and our scheduled guest this week is Tom Morris. I talked to Tom a little while ago, anticipating his arrival. I hope he does, because Tom's got the best stories. If you follow Tom Morris on Facebook, you can really appreciate Tom's interesting perspective, and he often has a pretty positive, jolly outlook, even when things go disastrously wrong, even when people really screw things up and he has to fix them. I'd love to have Tom's attitude myself. I'd love to be able to keep that, because he approaches problems as, hey, you know what? There's just another ridiculous problem to be solved, and here I am, and I'll solve it. And he typically does. So that's what we're going to talk about. If just in case Tom doesn't arrive, Chris and I have a number of things to chat about on today's show that will kind of lead along the same lines as Tom. So, hey, Chris, why don't you give your outlook and a preview of what we're going to hear from you on today's show?
Well, I'm going to have a story about, this is actually a project that I just kind of still wrapping up, but we got through it here. We had a radio station off for almost a week, and we'll just say that the symptoms were something I'd never seen before. So that is going to be one of the things I'm going to talk about today.
I had one of those this morning. So that's coming up. I've got an interesting. It's one of these fixes. I'll preview this. It was a telephony problem on the morning show on our new alt rock station in Oxford, Mississippi, and it's a little thing that it crossed my mind a month ago. Kirk, you should fix. You should change this so it has less chance of going wrong. And I thought, nah, it's worked for 6 months. it's fine, and it's supposed, and I'll describe it when we talk about our solving problems. But it may encourage you to think about how you handle things. Although in the fix could result in a problem itself. But I'll tell you what bit me in the butt this morning at 7 o'clock.
I was going to say, was there a narrator saying, and it wasn't completely fixed? Oh yeah, no,
pretty much.
It's fine. I guess we're not going to have that problem anymore. He had that problem again.
I had a month ago. I had the two engineers on my shoulder, right? One of them was saying, you should update that, and it'll be and that way, if there's a change at their end, it won't affect you. And the other one was, it's working fine, and it's going to keep working fine. So
yeah.
And who knows? I could have changed. I could have fixed it a month ago, and then it broke, and then every good deed.
We all do it.
Yeah. So, but it's an example of, hey, go ahead and do the best engineering practice, and you should be okay. Hey, real quick, before we jump into these stories, our show is brought to you in part by Nautel. Thank you, Jeff Welton and Fiona and John White and everybody at Nautel. Appreciate you very much. We got a quick little video clip here that is about not hairspray, but bear spray.
I talked to a guy up in Alaska, Dutch Harbor, who was a field engineer for a bunch of sites. Like a surveyor engineer kind of type guy. And he turned me on to something that I thought was just quite remarkable. He said he's tried carrying, weapons, bear spray, and all that kind of stuff, and it turns out that it's heavy, it's uncomfortable, it's hard to get on the plane, and he found out that he can carry those, air horns, canister air horns, and he said those are really quite good at deterring a bear. I mean, it's not perfect, but I mean, it's enough of a kind of it's like an audio flashbang, and they don't like it.
Wow, what a great idea. Carrie, one of those air horns like you have at high school basketball games. Well, that'd be great. That might be a safe alternative to, having a firearm by your bed is an air horn. Woo! Scare that intruder. Thanks, Nautel, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And go to nautel.com, and then you can check out all their old webinars. Of course, you can check out all their equipment, like the fabulous GV2 transmitter that has built-in HD capabilities. Nautel.com/webinars is the site you want to go to, where you can check out lots of their information that they have to make us engineers look good. Just educate yourself a bit. Thanks, Nautel. All right, Chris Tarr is here, and I think look who has entered the room. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Tom Morris. Hey, Tom, good to see you, man.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. One brutal ground loop later, I'm here.
Oh no! Did you have an audio problem?
Oh boy, did I ever! So, I've got this nice old mixer that has served me well for so many years. I had an issue with Bluetooth pairing on my device, and it was just the 3 box. I'm not actually that small. Good. Okay. So yeah, we're going to discuss some interesting stories today, and my hilarious one was just getting here today. I was trying to pair a Bluetooth audio device, and upstairs, the laundry machines in my apartment complex, they have some sort of weird card system, and it kept stealing the Bluetooth pairing from my audio devices. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just plug in this old USB mixer. Turns out I never knew this about it before, but when you turn on phantom power on it, it creates such an angry ground loop that it crashes the computer. And wow, that was interesting. So yeah, It got that resolved, and now I'm here to discuss other hilarity.
Chris, this happened many, many years ago, but Tom has been on the show before, maybe before you were kind of a regular on the co-host on the show, Chris. And in fact, I remember I was doing This Week in Radio Tech from Florida, from Orlando. In fact, we were at the Christian radio station there, WPOZ, and we were getting ready for an SBE meeting. And so it was an evening SBE meeting, and Tom was our guest. And the topic with Tom was something that Tom is very good at, and that is materials science. the science of different physical materials, whatever people choose to use to build products, towers, shelters, pieces of equipment, whatever it may be. And Tom had a lot of good information during that show. We have, I think, an equal, if not more interesting topic today, based, or it was the genesis of it was because of a post that Tom made on Facebook about a certain HVAC maintenance event, and the company that did it, which I guess we're not going to mention, and what they screwed up while they were there. They fixed. I'm sure they did one. They checked the boxes, and then they screwed up something else. And Tom got to notice it. So we'll be talking about that. Hey, Tom, Chris has an interesting story too. We'll be getting to in just a few minutes. Hey, Tom, by way of introduction, would you tell us where you are and kind of what you do? You're in the TV business, aren't you?
Yes, I'm in the TV business in Sacramento, California, and it's hard to say what I do. Like I was talking to Kirk about this earlier, and on paper, I'm a maintenance technician, and that I think is about as general as it needs to be because I wind up doing a little bit of everything. I'm everywhere from RF to studio work to also maintaining some of the building stuff because, well, we have unique needs and so in this industry, and some very strange things happen occasionally, and I'm usually the one who happens to be there to resolve it. And yes, the story that Kirk was referring to has to do with a topic that is very, very vital to us, of air conditioning, especially in television, where you have many kilowatts of lighting and computer equipment that are sitting there kicking out heat all the time. So the air conditioning is extremely vital. You are dead in the water without it, and I fight my battles with it a lot.
Yeah,
and I am being yelled at by a cat.
and plenty of TV stations have had this battle for years. Although, well, you kind of update me on your place, because I recall that when I started in television doing some TV weather, and I just did that part-time, don't do it part-time anymore. But yeah, lighting was a huge burden on the air conditioning needs of the TV station. But now so many stations have gone to the fluorescent tube lighting panels, or of course LEDs, and those draw a much lower amount of power. So I got to imagine that the air conditioning needs have changed. What's your TV station doing there in Sacramento?
So we're on a hybrid of different technologies, and boy, I wish I could fix the focus on this little webcam. It's driving me nuts. But anyway, continuing beyond that, yeah, we're in a hybrid situation where we have we're a CBS affiliate. My workplace, and CBS originally had one lighting guy who did all of the owned and operated stations, and he still was sticking with a lot of halogen lights. So we still have the big old 2 kilowatt monster Fresnels lighting the set, and on the other side we do have a mix of LED, some halogen, and a lot of those tube lights, which the tube lights are actually kind of at risk of aging out because a lot of, like, the ballasts have become unavailable. And I mean, understandably so, because the entire industry is moving away from them to LED products. But the great thing with the LED products, of course, that I absolutely love is most of them are variable color temp, and you can just dial it in. So we can remain 3,300 Kelvin forever if we need to. I mean, even the ring light I'm using here has 3 different color options, and apparently a random flicker, which I hope nobody else notices, but it's driving me up the wall. So yeah, the air conditioning is really interesting in that, like, you can kind of tell when the moment you turn off the lights, the air conditioning has to react. It's like if it doesn't shut off in time, everyone starts running to the closet for the winter parkas and snowshoes.
Oh my goodness! Wow, yeah, I can remember times when the AC died at Fox 17 here in Nashville, and it was challenging. So Chris is standing by to tell his story, but what got me interested in having you back on, Tom, was a story about HVAC. Can you detail what happened, and just what the great reminder is for engineers, whether they're in radio or TV? What's the great reminder that we need to be aware of since we're responsible for our own plants?
All right. Well, the great reminder, if I can summarize it immediately, is become familiar with the way your system normally operates and how things are configured, what's supposed to be running, what's not supposed to be running on a regular basis, and just watch it casually. I mean, some of the systems like ours, our system is controlled by Johnson Controls Metasys, which is, I don't know if it's based on or if it's their own spin-off of a BACnet-based system like Carrier, Train, and other manufacturers use, but it actually would have the ability to pepper us with alarm messages 24/7 if we enabled that, which we don't, because it generates a lot of nuisance alarms that are very difficult to configure out. But there are certain things like too many cooks have worked on this system, so we just have to watch it a lot. And the issue I run into a lot is when somebody is there to do preventative maintenance on it. I think with our contractor, which we're actually switching contractors now, thankfully, and I hope the new one is familiar with this, but a lot of these contractors, they'll work on systems where it works a lot more like your typical home air conditioner. There's a split system or maybe an RTU, which is a one piece rooftop unit, and it's just controlled by a simple thermostat, one zone. Maybe it's multi-stage cooling, but that doesn't really add any complexity to it. What we have is a system where there are a few large air handlers for the whole building and variable air volume controls that will automatically try to maintain room temperatures by providing a certain mix of hot and cold air to the conditioned space. And that adds just in orders of magnitude of complexity. But one of the interesting things, like what I had posted on Facebook, which was probably, I can't even remember if the video captured how dramatic this was, but the air handlers in our system, they have variable speed motors for the blowers. And since the variable air volume dampers in the building are all moving in unpredictable ways, there's an air pressure sensor up there in the RTU, or it's not really an RTU, it's just a big fan coil monster. And it will try to automatically scale that blower speed up and down to maintain 1-inch water column supply pressure in the ducts. Well, the crew that came out to do the PM, I guess, like, I'm sure most of us are totally familiar with variable frequency drives, right? I mean, yeah, they're everywhere. Well, if you have an old, if you have like a Rodian Schwartz or Harris or Gates Air liquid cooled transmitter, you're probably a little more familiar with them because they're used to run the pumps and the fan drives. But usually those are pretty much just like I know on my Gates Air ones, they're behind a cover on the pump station and you don't ordinarily ever have to touch them. I just look at them periodically to make sure they're behaving correctly. But in this case, the guys doing the PM, they turned off the blower, changed the filters, and instead of putting it back in auto so it would track that air pressure, they put it in manual on that ramped it up to full speed. And next thing I know, like, I'm coming in early in the morning when there's like no heat load in the building, all the lights are off and stuff. I'm like thinking, Union Pacific is running a big train of auto racks across the station roof, aren't they? The whole building was shaking. So I go up there and find the thing sitting there, and like the air pressure sensor read 4 inches water column. It had actually I just discovered yesterday, it actually tore like a canvas coupling in the air duct at some point, which I'm guessing may have been related to overpressure, but boy, it got mad. And I think, I kind of almost don't blame the crew for not knowing how to do this. And they probably would have never caught it if I'd called them back and asked them why it was so freaking loud. But yeah, it was, this was just like, you had to know how this system is supposed to behave to catch it. And I don't know how many other stations may have something quite this complex. I mean, my old station back in Miami had a bunch of different air handlers, and none of that ductwork fun, but you kind of had to know, and you had to be ready for, especially there, you had to be ready for, the server room is trying to become a crock pot again.
Yeah. This sounds like the kind of thing that can happen when a company purchases or puts together something that's fairly complex, and maybe a company was hired, an HVAC company was hired to design this system, and the system ended up being more complex than anybody who followed up later on would really realize and be aware of. And so, who really understands the whole thing? I mean, Tom, last question before we think about taking a break here. Is there anybody else at the TV station that understands this system like you do?
I'm working on that. I'm trying to train the other engineers on how to keep up with it. And unsurprisingly, every time I try to show somebody the great field of mystery values, some of which are helpfully labeled, some of which are not, in the control software, their eyes turn to little spirals and they melt into a puddle of static on the floor, and then I have to go sweep them up and reconstitute them in the freezer. It gets so messy.
Tom's descriptions. Chris, and thankfully radio is usually a little bit less complex than television is, but I guess we do probably have some examples of systems that are complex at broadcast facilities, radio facilities. I know you've got a whole server facility, Chris, with a lot of SNMP and things going on, and if you got hit by a bus, who would be figuring that out?
Well, it's only slightly less complicated than brain surgery. No, I mean, that's where it's the whole try not to do security by obscurity, job security by obscurity. Everything's documented very well, and I have an assistant who knows everything I do about how we have this all set up. And the very last, the very top line, all the principals of the company have a copy of all the passwords and addresses for everything. So, because we've talked about that, what if the past couple of years I built most of the infrastructure of these stations. So what happens if I get hit by a bus or something? They need to be able to continue on. So we've really made a good job of documenting everything and making sure that everybody knows where to find what they need to find.
Our guest on the show is Tom Morris. Glad he got the ground loop problem solved and can join us. Tom is, I suggested maybe you're an electron plumber. He said, yeah, that's a pretty good description. I kind of like that. He's at the TV station in Sacramento, CBS station out there. And Tom's going to be back with us here in a few minutes with some more stories and things that we can learn from those stories. And I think it's very applicable to radio as well. And even how we on this show, so often the advice is document. And I think we all could do a better job of that. I'm Kirk Harnack along with Chris Tarr and our guest Tom Morris. Our show is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics. And let me tell you, or let the video here tell you about the Bionic Studio. Check it out.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These can be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
One of the things I really love about Broadcast Bionics, all the products you just saw, all the systems and workflows you just saw, those are on the air right now at dozens, if not hundreds, of radio stations around the world. And they try them out at really high-profile broadcasters in England, and then they spread that out to other countries as well. Broadcast Bionics makes some amazing stuff. You ought to check out their website at bionics.co.uk or bionic.radio. And thanks a lot for, being real on the cutting edge of workflow and engineering. They've been partners with my employer, Telos Alliance, for quite some years. In fact, it was Steve Church and Dan McQuillan that struck up a friendship and realized that, hey, we can do some really cool things together. And they do. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack. Chris Tarr is here, my co-host, and Tom Morris is our guest. So Tom, you told that story about the HVAC contractor and the freight train overhead because they left something in the wrong position. And I'm sorry if I missed it. What as engineers, what should we take away from that experience? Is it to what? Trust but verify? Is it go back and look at what they did? Is it really understand? How would you, knowing what you know now, how would you have followed up on the tail end of their visit or warned them prior to their work?
Well, I think trust but verify is definitely a vital part of that, because there are certain things where we've kind of come to understand that some things are really trouble free. Like, there are some contractors we work with where they just pretty much come in, do their thing, and go, and it works. It all works out perfectly fine. I think there are just some things where you kind of have to compare against your own documented normal operations and make sure everything was left in a good state when they're done. I'm just thinking also of a recent issue we had come up where our network is getting ready to air the Super Bowl, so we're doing a lot of extra shakedowns, making sure everything's happy and up to date. And we discovered that one of the ATSC encoders at some point, one of the technicians who had remoted in to help us out with working on it had to change a password because Windows decided to expire it. And I don't know. I have words to say about Windows that I don't want to say on a public screen, but never mind that. It decided, you need new credentials for this now. And we're still trying to figure out where these were documented. So it's like, it had better not break before Super Bowl. I mean, thankfully it's the backup and we have a backup to the backup, but it's still one of those things where it's like, wait a minute. I really wonder about that one, how we're going to exactly resolve that in the future, or if that one will just wind up having to have its software fully reloaded or something in the future. But I'm trying not to worry about that for now. We're good for the moment. But yeah, I definitely, thinking of something that Chris was mentioning, we do have a couple of systems for storing login credentials and other important information, and that's extremely vital. And you need, of course, you need to make sure that not everyone and their neighbor Joe has access to it, but those people who do need to get into it can in a situation. It's even one where you may not have internet access because you're up at a transmitter site where about the only RF coming in is your STL and the only RF going out is your FM or TV signal. I've certainly been to a lot of those where you have to kind of stand on your head in just the right place to get a text message out. And yeah, you definitely would want to have a good portable means of accessing any credentials you need at that point. I think with documentation is kind of, we're sort of in a state of flux right now where we're working to try to modernize a couple of things. Like we actually have a in-house piece of software that was written to maintain our wiring database. So every wire hopefully has a number, and hopefully I didn't mess them up when entering them. Not guilty. No, I am guilty of that. I'm sorry. Sorry to any of my coworkers who have to deal with it. No, I think we've sorted all that out for the most part. But anyway, it was something that was written in-house by an engineer who is now retired, and we're trying to modernize it to make sure that it can continue to be used in the future, because it has, it's sort of tied to a certain version of PHP and a certain connections to a Microsoft SQL server, and those tend not to age well. So we're just making sure we can go with a platform that remains serviceable in the near future and the far future.
That is interesting how, as engineers, our problems and our concerns change over the decades. The problems you're describing now were not problems 40 years ago, or maybe even 30 years ago, or maybe even 20 years ago. And they definitely weren't problems 70 years ago, back when Chris Tarr was starting his engineering career.
Yeah, right.
Chris, we'll give Tom a few seconds of break here, and you had a story, Chris, that you wanted to relate to us that we could learn something from. What would that be?
Well, I don't know if you can learn anything from it, but it's just fascinating. So I got this call from somebody near our station in Wisconsin Dells, and they said, "Oh, I can't get the station in." And I called the remote control. All the readings look great. And, so the first thing I'm thinking is, okay, is your radio broken? Da, 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 da. So I do a little digging, and sure enough, there's really no signal coming out of the station. So I go up there, I go to the transmitter. Everything looks great. There's no faults. All the meter readings are good, but there's no signal. And I am just, how does this happen? Where, the transmitter's not overheating, so it's not circulating in the transmitter. So where's the RF going? It was just, I was stunned. So I got my site master out, swept the line, and it showed a fault at I don't know where it was, 80 feet. And I look up the line, and there's actually 2 splices in the line. I went, okay, well, maybe, we blew open a splice. So it happened that I had enough coax that I had bought left over from something else that I could replace all the coax on the line. So I do that. We get it all done. Still nothing. Still not working. Well, it turns out I open up the ISO coupler, and it looks pretty bad. So I bypass the ISO coupler, and the FM comes up. Everybody can hear it. Life is good. It turns out that the ISO coupler was radiating. So the transmitter was loading into the ISO coupler, but the RF wasn't getting past it. So the transmitter looked happy, but no one could hear the station because the antenna was just a little part of the ISO coupler at 10 feet off the ground. I had never ever seen anything like this before. And we were off the air for almost a week trying to, get new transmission line up there. And, and we were all just sitting around going, why is this transmitter running? It should not be running. If things are as bad as it's showing, this should not be running at all. Why is it we're like, where is this RF going to? I mean, it's just, are we spilling it on the floor or something? I mean, what's going on? And so yeah, it was a failed ISO coupler. I'd never seen that. Usually, if they burn up or they have an issue, your transmitter just won't go on. But in this case, the ISO coupler was radiating, and it was just, I was stunned. I had never seen that before, and it was just, but that was one of those issues where I never would have thought the ISO coupler, so I didn't even start there. So, we wasted a day or so just on that. I mean, we did find out that the ISO coupler went bad because of the splice. One of the splices opened up and had some crud in there, which caused some issues. So it was just one of those, that part was right, but that was just, that was the problem, but it wasn't all the symptoms. So, once we got all that fixed and then I find out that it works without the ISO coupler, then we tear into that because it just never, I never would have thought that. I thought maybe, the open on the splice was, right at the right frequency or the right wavelength where the transmitter was loading into it. Okay. And, I just didn't, it was still weird. It still shouldn't have done that. But, I'm like going, well, it could be this or this or this. Never in a million years. And so there you go. It just, sometimes it's the thing that you least expect that's the problem.
I got a follow-up question, but isn't it funny that a piece of equipment fails in such a way that I'm going to fail in such a way that I'm going to be invisible? The failure will not look like me.
Oh, it's, and trying to explain that to the owner, because the owner just wanted us to throw another transmitter in. It's got to be a bad transmitter. Throw this backup in there. And I was like, well, I can, and I will to test it, but I can guarantee you that's not the problem because the transmitter is running just fine. I mean, there's no issue. But it was just, it was one of those things where because it was working fine. And in fact, my boss said, well, shouldn't we turn it off? I said, actually, no, leave it on. Cause if we can smoke something, then at least I'll know.
Yeah. Well, that okay. So the ISO coupler failed in such a way that it didn't present a terrible load to the transmitter, so things looked okay, but the power wasn't getting past the ISO coupler. You mentioned that you bypassed the ISO coupler. What did you do? Undo the bolts and just hook the coax to itself, and then the ISO coupler's there for a reason. Was it on a hot AM tower? What happened with that?
Yes. It's a hot AM tower. We're off for a little bit here while we're getting the ISO coupler fixed. But we just put the input to the ISO coupler and the output from it and just put them together. And came right up. We didn't have any problems. In fact, it came up better than it has in a long time because we put in that brand new transmission line.
Oh, wow. Chris Tarr is. Oh, well, Chris, what do you have any takeaways that we could learn as an engineer? At first you said, no, there's not really a good takeaway. Here's just what happened. But as engineers, what should we keep our minds open to? And why didn't the ISO coupler get hot? That's a little strange to me.
Here's a couple of things to take away. Number one, if you have older transmission line, like some older Andrew, I'm passing this out. The 1 5/8 flange connectors are unobtainium. You can get them. There's one company now in overseas that makes them. I want to say Germany. And you're looking at weeks in order to get one. I happened to get the last one that was stateside for this project. So that's number one. You should know, if you can get your hands on them, keep them. I think the second one, the ISO coupler may have gotten hot. By the time I even got to that, both stations had been off for a while. So, I didn't, because again, I didn't think to check it. But I think that's the takeaway is, don't get hung up on one thing being the problem and kind of, hitching your horse to it, because I swore that it was the splice. That was the only thing that made sense to me was, okay, it's got to be this splice. Well, obviously that was part of it, but there was more to it, and we didn't find out until after we fixed that problem. So, my takeaway is, even if, you think you've found the problem, don't quit digging until you've actually, gone through the entire troubleshooting process working backwards. I mean, again, had I just opened the cover to that ISO coupler, I would have seen right away that there was a problem there. And it just was like, it can't be the ISO coupler. I mean, that just, we got that splice up there. That's got to be it. So I think that's the takeaway is sometimes we get overconfident about what we see, and, we tend to go, okay, that's got to be it. That looks like the most obvious solution. And we stop, go, okay, we're moving on. And then of course you get it done, and now all of a sudden you're back to square one, and it's like, okay, now what? So that, I guess that's the big thing. Is just, as you're working through these things, make sure you even, you do consider the things that aren't at all obvious, and just take a look.
My takeaway, because usually when there's a problem, and maybe Tom can chime in on this in a minute. Usually when there's a problem, it's one problem. And if you find accurately the one problem and fix it, then the whole thing will be fixed and it will work. And yes, we get we get sometimes it is two problems. And a lot of times in hindsight, the symptom with the one problem will be weird enough to where, how will fixing that one problem that I think it is resolve these other problems? Just like you said, why is there no real reflected power at the transmitter with perhaps a shorted or open in the transmission line? And, that didn't make a lot of sense. Well, it turned out later on it did make sense when you found out the isocoupler. And so we do run across problems like that where... Go ahead.
And working backwards, I mean, the first problem that I saw was what caused the second problem. So I was on the right track. But again, you start to think, well, if the open is in the right place on the line, you theoretically could load the transmitter into it without having much of a problem. I'd see a little more reflected power, but we're not talking about a 50 kilowatt transmitter here. It's 3 kilowatts or whatever. In theory, that could happen. Or, maybe there's enough of power getting up the line that, we've got some of it getting to the antenna or whatever. So that was where, that comes in, is because you just absolutely don't think that this other thing could be the problem. The more you think about it, you go, well, that would be, because I remember having the conversation I had about it. I was like, that would be unusual for it to be able to load into that, but I guess it could happen. So, you don't really, again, if the transmitter tripped off and, I saw sparks flying somewhere, I would go, oh yeah, there's a short in the line. And again, the TDR showed me that was where the fault was where the splice was. So everything told me that it was the splice.
So you're hoping that fixing the obvious problem will also fix the slight mystery that was that you thought was attending the obvious problem.
Right. Well,
that mystery being the transmitter was loading. Yeah.
Right. And right. That's why, I was like, okay, well, obviously there's something wrong with this splice. So I did think that, at least that's step one. We know that, and we can fix that. So, we'll cross the bridge if we get to something else. Again, never in a million years did I think isocoupler. They do go bad, but I've never seen them fail that way.
Exactly.
To the point where a transmitter's happy. Usually it's just, they trip off and you're done. And then it's pretty obvious where you'll find the smoke. I just, again, we all work with experience. I suppose if I had never done this before, I probably would have questioned the isocoupler, because I wouldn't have thought about that. I'm like, in all my years dealing with this stuff, I've never had anything fail like that. So I guess it can't be that,
So here's Kirk. Here's Kirk playing the part of the isocoupler in this case, in the kitchen when the wife says, "Where did the last of the ice cream go?" And I go,
yeah, no smoke or anything.
I just keep laughing.
I just
thinking. I just keep laughing thinking about how I had I had a couple last summer. I don't know. It all runs together, but I had a record high temperature here where that contributed to a burnout in 7 5/16 inch line, and it took me an entire day of fighting with the transmitter to be able to get it to get to the point where I could actually figure out that it's a transmitter problem and a line problem. It's a floor wax and a dessert topping. Yeah, sure.
Right, yeah. Okay, Dan. Dan Aykroyd. But country and western. But it's one of those things where, and part of the fun of this job is, things find new and exciting ways to break. So, we got to keep on top of it.
That's right. Hey, when we come back from our next commercial, Tom, I hope you have another story for us that we might be able to learn from. Like, if you need a minute, that's fine. But if you can preview something we're going to hear in a couple minutes, the stage is yours to kind of tease us a little bit.
All right.
All right. Well, so we'll come back to you right after the commercial break. Obviously, we only talked minimally about this show, but Tom, with his years of experience in both radio and television, I know we're going to hear something else good. Plus, I've got this weird thing that happened this morning. Our show is brought to you in part by Broadcasters General Store, and one of the most famous manufacturers of all time. We all know them and love them, and that's Henry Engineering. Hank Landsberg is the proprietor, the owner of Henry Engineering. He's been on our show before, and one of the most brilliant things he's come up with, and you can buy similar products elsewhere. They typically cost a ton more. But this is just right-sized for so many applications in radio engineering like we do. And that is the back UPS from Henry Engineering. You can get it, of course, at Broadcasters General Store. And the back UPS is, I found, for me, the best use for it. I have an equipment rack at my new station in Oxford, Mississippi, where I've got a number of computers and other devices that do not have redundant power supplies in them. They have one single power supply. And I want to keep them powered all the time, even if my UPS fails. And we found out a failure mode for the UPS after some lengthy power outages, like it doesn't come back on by itself, and you can't make it come back on by itself. Somebody has to go out there and push the button. What a bad design. We're replacing that sucker right away. But the back UPS lets it switch. It switches automatically for you. Normally, it would be like on the UPS. And so it has two power inputs and one power output. Well, the power output's actually a duplex outlet like you see there on the screen if you're looking. And you've got two different power inputs. One, presumably from a UPS. The other could be from another UPS, or it could be just directly from the line voltage. And that's how I have mine hooked up. One's from the UPS, one's from the line voltage. And so if the UPS dies, or if you purposely take the UPS down to change the batteries or check the settings on it or something like that, it will automatically instantly switch over to the line input and keep your equipment running. So I do have this rack with several computers that are essential to our operation, and they didn't come with dual power supplies. We could have spent more money, but we didn't. So the back UPS is my safety net. When the UPS fails, it just runs right over to the line input. And then when the UPS comes back after a battery change or after it's partially charged up or whatever it needs, the back UPS can be set with a time delay to switch back over to the good input, the primary input, which in our case is the UPS input. So you can have uninterrupted power on your load going to your devices. Now, frankly, if I had a bunch of computers in that rack that had two power supplies in them, like I do in the adjacent rack, I've got several servers in the adjacent rack, and they have dual power supplies, and one's hooked to the UPS in that rack, and the other two, directly to commercial power. Then that kind of negates the need for the back UPS. But the way I got it arranged, almost all the devices in one rack have one power supply, and the back UPS has saved our bacon several times. I'm really glad that Hank Landsberg came up with this. It does have a remote control on it, so you can force it to switch. You can see its status remotely if you like. And it's got a 3-position switch there to put it into different modes of operation. And you can adjust the delay time for returning to the main power. If you don't trust it quite, you want to make sure it's going to be stable. Check it out from Broadcasters General Store. You can check them out on the web at bgs.cc, or call them at 352-622-7700. 352-622-7700. Love the folks at Broadcaster General Store. I've known them and been dealing with them for years. And in fact, I used to hang out with Sam Phillips, the guy who discovered Elvis Presley and ran Phillips Recording Service and Sun Studios. And Sam would be building a new radio station, and he'd have me at his office, and he'd say, "Kurt, call them pretty little ladies over at BGS and get a good price on, give me a new processor." So we do that. What a great bunch. Thanks a lot, Broadcaster General Store and Henry Engineering, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, along with Chris Tarr, and Tom Morris is our guest. And we left Tom thinking I don't know what he was thinking, but we left Tom thinking. Tom, have you got another story for us to learn something from?
Well, I was thinking, going back to tracing down weird problems, and I feel like my luck half the time is it becomes a strange trail almost, like, because in the radio world, I kind of miss doing stuff with radio a lot more because it's fairly simple. You send audio from point A to point B, basically, and anything that's related to metadata generally does not flow along the whole system along with audio. I've had some odd experiences that are a little more specific to television, where you have to trace stuff down, but it gets really interesting adding that complexity, because I've had, I was talking about how I tracked down that transmission line issue, and that was probably like the longest day I've ever spent at the station, because it was like after I had traced down the transmission line issue. I remember, I think this was actually the same day I'd had Steve Wilde come over, and he swept the line and confirmed that something did indeed look really borked up 1,500 feet or so up the tower. And I can't even remember how tall this tower is. It was at one time the tallest man-made structure west of the Mississippi. I don't know if it still is, but it's a beast. You go up there and you're actually looking down at the old site that was originally the first broadcast tower for the Sacramento area. I think that one's at like 1,800 feet, and it was built in the 1960s and 70s. And anyway, I came back and I found one of the other engineers running around like an absolute headless chicken, trying to figure out why just about everything in the plant that was passing through our master control system, every now and then the picture would tear and glitch. And we were like, what on earth is going on here? Like, it was definitely a timing issue, but I've apparently gotten pretty good with fixing these. So in video, you often, and I would say pretty much always in a large facility, you have to have a master reference, which is basically a source that just sends the same video to everything, and everything uses it for timing as to when each frame is going to begin. And in most cases, it's just black burst video. It's basically just blank NTSC video with the sync tips and color burst. And nobody really thinks too much about it, because a lot of that infrastructure, if you're in an older plant, was put in back when it was originally commissioned, and everything is just kind of, over time, as things move and change, they get attached and detached to it and stuff. Well, then what happens when the old distribution amps decide to get a really bad case of old? And I've been running into a few cases of that. So at 2 a.m., I was running around there with an oscilloscope, probing various reference sources until I found a bad DA card and swapped that out. And surprise, everything's happy, and we all got to go to bed again. But there are a few of those moments. I've also had issues where occasionally one of our network feeds that comes down off a satellite receiver, sometimes the satellite receiver will glitch due to poor signal, or just the receiver decides to crash at some point. It happens. But when it crashes, it sends something curiously invalid that if you send it to a monitor, it looks like fully saturated rainbow snow. And I call it rainbow death snow, because for some reason, the rainbow death snow gets into everything downstream and crashes everything. So you'll find like, oh, I've got a chain of 5 crashed devices in series, and the last one in the chain is the encoder. So we're off the air.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
It's not too uncommon, but yeah, we now take very careful steps whenever we're touching one of those IRDs to patch stuff out so that the rainbow death snow can't cascade down and cause the rainbow death avalanche.
Man,
so bizarre.
That's awesome.
Chris, the closest thing to that I can think of is remembering the olden days of AM transmitters or FM exciters that could be unlocked by too much bass excursion. You might have a song that would actually knock your transmitter off the air for a second. You remember those days?
I had one recently where the combination of the processor and the exciter, whenever they ran an EAS test, it dropped the carrier.
Wow.
So
at least we don't have to deal in
happens.
radio with rainbow death snow. That's it.
I kind of wish I could, because that sounds nice.
I used to wonder why there was that 20 hertz subsonic filter option in the 20 or 30 hertz subsonic filter option in the Orban processors. And then out of curiosity, one day I bench tested it with an old, I think an old QEI exciter. And sure enough, if I turned that off, I was able to put in some really nasty sub bass audio and cause the exciter to blink in and out of lock. So like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Thankfully, I've never actually had it happen in practice, but I just wanted to see it happen. So
Rainbow Death Snow sounds like a great idea for a new Wikipedia entry that Tom Morris will make so that everybody will know.
I want that. I want Rainbow Death Snow. That sounds great.
We should form a company and patent it. That's what we should do.
The snow we get here is death snow, but it's not rainbow. At least if it was rainbow, I'd be happy.
I've seen pictures of of where a car wash was inadvertently turned on in sub-freezing conditions, and it kind of looked like that.
Yeah, there you go. Tricolor wax
kind of came down into icicles. It was oops.
I'm glad you mentioned car wash because I did propose a name for this episode, and it was TCFW. Tom, tell our audience what is TCFW. I love it.
Good old tricolor foaming wax, and yes, and I tend to leave this phrase in various places. Like if you grab one of our little fabrics testers and pull up the test pattern, it'll say tricolor foaming wax on the label, and like everyone's just kind of gotten used to that from me. So
over the years, Tom's words have become a meme.
To my strange credit, there is a Vice article about the out there about where PDQ Manufacturing put out their laser wash car washes with a glaring, horrible cybersecurity problem. Like you could pass unauthenticated Modbus commands via URL parameter straight to the variable frequency drives and make the wash physically move immediately in response with no sanity checking. And there's a video I took of a laser wash on the article.
I assure you, I'm not obsessed with Tom Morris, but every time I go through a car wash and the TCFW comes down on the car, I think Tom.
Oh,
Morris.
I do too. Oh, yeah. No, that's become a meme. It's become a meme over the years with that. It really has.
I mean, I am a very colorful personality after
you are absolutely.
Oh gosh. Hey, I promised I'd relay my little situation from the day, my little troubleshooting, and we talked about it briefly, but we weren't specific about it. Got a call this morning at 7 a.m. Morning man at WBZK. Hey Kirk, I can't get phone calls on the air. I can't dial anything, and a call comes in, it rings once and goes away. Something's wrong. So I thought, wow, this is the Telos VXS. It's a Telos VX running as a Docker container on the same physical Linux computer as the audio console, the Axia Altus is running, and then that was working fine. I obviously was on the air. He said the phone didn't work. Well, that's interesting. So my first thought was, well, I guess I could go restart the Docker container, but it's not supposed to exhibit this. That's restarting the Docker container. If that worked, it would have hidden, well, what was the actual problem? And so I wasn't interested in restarting the container, and I wasn't sure that was going to fix it anyway. Turned out that wouldn't have fixed it, but. So I was thinking about what could have gone wrong. Well, we use the services of a SIP provider, hosted PBX in the cloud, called clearlyip.com. And they have been delightful to work with. I've recommended them to other people, and we've been absolutely delighted with their service. in the early days of putting the Telos VXS in, we were having some kind of problem. And as part of our troubleshooting, rather than put in the URL or the URI maybe for the server in the cloud into our Telos VXS, hey, where's the SIP server? Well, here it is at this long number .clearlyip.me. We switched it to the IP address of that server in the cloud, thinking maybe we have a DNS problem. And so we did that. That didn't fix that problem that we had back then, but I just left it at that. The IP address is not going to change. It's our phone provider in the cloud. So, guess what happened last night? The IP address changed, and of course, on all the business phones, in there is the URI, which looks up the IP address, right? And if it changes, it gets updated. But my Telos VXS was still calling for the hard octet, the 4-octet IP address, and that was no longer the IP address of our SIP server. So I thought about it, and anyway, so I went into VXS remotely, and I still had the SIP URI. I mean the URI for the SIP server, and so I just put that in place, and voila, the line's registered. And it worked, and I tested it out remotely, and that fixed it. But a month ago, I was looking at the VXS. Nothing was wrong with it. I was kind of looking, reviewing, how it was set up, and I thought I should change that back over to the URI and not the fixed IP address. What if it changes? Then I'll be up a little creek. Well, this morning I was up a little creek. So if you think it's a good idea. Yeah. Best practice would be the URI. Second best practice would be the IP address, and that was just for troubleshooting. So there you go. That's my little story. Hey, we got to take our last break of the show, and when we come back, we're going to get a tip of the week from Chris Tarr and from Tom Morris, but not from me, because I'm all tipped out. Our show is brought to you in part by Angry Audio, and Chris Tarr has a very deep personal relationship with some Angry Audio products. Chris, what would you like to tell us about?
I do. I love them. In fact, if I could marry them, I would. No, I'm just kidding. There was a lot of talk on the Facebooks this week about the USB audio gizmo. In fact, I think Corny put a post up about it, and it started actually a very interesting discussion about different audio interfaces for computers to consoles. And one of the big issues is, of course, the bleed over of the interference from the processor to the audio card. So you hear a high-pitched whine or whatever in your audio. Even with some outboard cards, there's not enough isolation, and you still hear it. And as Corny and Catfish were talking, they both said they use this stuff at home, and they had the problem. So then it was time to fix it. So, of course, what does that mean with Angry Audio? Go to the gizmo. They designed this gizmo to be completely isolated. And as Catfish Mike Dosh said, it was not an easy process. This was not easy to design, but the results speak for themselves. And everybody was talking about how handy this is. Somebody said they just replaced one, used one of these to replace an issue that they had at their studio, and they're buying more. They're going to put them in all their computers. So what you can do is plug this in, USB port, looks like a sound card. It's got the Studio Hub in and Studio Hub out connectors, but the audio is completely isolated. So you don't get the whine, you don't get the interference, you don't get the scratches and the, crackling and things like that. You just get clear, clean audio. So it's the USB audio gizmo. If you have a home studio, they're perfect. I know a lot of home studios have to have some sort of interface. This is perfect for that. Or if you're a voice tracker or in the studio, you want to put your console on the air, this is a great way to interface it. The USB audio gizmo, you can check it out at angryaudio.com. You can buy them from your favorite broadcast equipment dealer. So when these problems come up, don't get frustrated. Don't lose hope. Just get angry. Angryaudio.com.
That's funny. I have that same USB analog audio gizmo here at my office, and I was interfacing a computer, a MacBook Pro, and I was using a cheaper off-brand USB interface to do it, and I had a ground loop, and it was not pretty. And I thought,
and that's what
Go ahead.
As I say, and that's what Catfish was saying, is not all those adapters are created equal. So you could get a lesser one and have those same problems.
Well, I put the Angry Audio USB audio gizmo in there, and bam, cleanest, beautifully clean as it's supposed to be. It was just beautiful. One thing is worth pointing out. One of the most common support calls that Catfish gets about anything with Studio Hub is you do need to use shielded Cat5 cable as your connection, and especially if you're going from a balanced device to an unbalanced device, if you have to do that kind of thing. And I had to recently, and the shield, or I should say the drain wire, which is connected to the shield, is part of the circuit. And so you may get away with it for years not using a shielded cable with a drain wire for Studio Hub, but it'll bite you at some point, and it'll work better with it. So all the cables that are sold by Angry Audio, of course, are shielded cables, and they have the drain wire connected at both ends. And so there you go. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Angry Audio, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Our show is also brought to you by Max Connect Audio, and a box that's actually designed and built by Angry Audio, but is exclusively marketed by Max Connect Audio, and that's the U.192 box. And you know what? I need to get one of these for one of my own radio stations. We're going to reconfigure when we move our AM transmitter into a new building, and also move the FM translator that's on the same AM tower. We're going to move the STL around and bring we're going to free up an audio processor is what we're going to do. Long story short, I need this box. This is the Max Connect Broadcast U192 MPX USB sound card. You plug its USB connection into your computer that is running your FM audio processor. So at this particular station for the FM translator, I'm running the Omnia SST software. Of course, this also works with software like Stereo Tool. And so if you want to run an FM processor on a computer, you might need some way to get MPX audio out of that. Now, in my case, I'm already using that software to send micro MPX to another translator site. But I'm going to need it to be local as well, local to the computer that's running Omnia SST. So I will be plugging this U192 box into that same computer, getting a second output for the MPX, and we'll just run that right into the STL that's going to go out to the AM and FM translator site. This is so cool. It's made for doing this job. You know, the industry came along with software-based FM processors, and you really had to finagle some sound card that may or may not work well for that purpose. This is designed to do exactly the right thing. For Stereo Tool, for Omnia SST, for probably some breakaway FM processors, this will give you that analog or digital AES 192 kilohertz output that you're looking for. That is MPX over AES. It'll do all that. Check it out at Max Connect, MAXXKONNECT.com. It's the U192. Hey, we just got another minute or two, and real quick, let's see if we can get a tip of the week. Quickly. Chris, why don't you go first, and then we'll let Tom wrap it up for us.
Sure. Yesterday, we had to put in a new antenna at our site in Rockford, Illinois. And sure enough, the antenna came with a different connector than what I had running up the tower. So, and do not fear, I carry all kinds of connectors in my Jeep. So that's my tip of the day. Order one of each kind of connector for all of your sites, end to inch and 5/8, end to 3, and whatever. In this case, we had an end connector at the end of the cable and a 7/8 inch EIA in the input to the antenna. Were we doomed? No, just ran and grabbed one, put it on there. But always remember, once you do that, order a replacement. But carry all those in your car, because you don't want to be, in the case of Rockford, 2 hours away and just have to call or you have to tell the tower climbers to go home and come back later.
Yeah, good point. Good thing you had that with you, and great to carry those kind of things. I got to say, my business partner, Larry Fuss, is good about keeping extra connectors in stock. We tend to keep them at one location, and no other location is more than a 1 hour drive. So it's kind of okay. So, hey, Tom Morris, who has been with us the whole show. Tom, do you have a tip of the week that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, kind of on that same note, something I wanted to share. Like, I kind of wish I'd grabbed a picture of it, but we have we've really been having a good time now with taking those like pack out boxes that they have where it's a series of they're available from a couple of different brands with these stackable bin holder boxes, and we've lately been moving our inventory of connectors and into those, since we make a lot of video cable connectors and stuff. And then you can grab that and the tools and not have to keep running back for stuff. It's really saved us a lot of time, and I would highly recommend that if you're doing like a lot of audio connectors or RF or anything like that. Just keep the tools right there, and then hopefully you won't have to go scrambling back for missing bits and pieces.
Got you. Good advice. Good. And I make a similar, much smaller mistake myself. I'll start fixing something, and I'll grab a screwdriver out of my toolbox, and I'll go run over to where the stuff is that I'm working on. And after my 15th run back to the toolbox for other stuff, I need my Phillips that's got a stronger bit on it.
You got to get your steps in somehow.
That's right. That's exactly right. Hey, we got to go. Tom, thank you for making the extra effort to be with us and get the washing machine and Bluetooth problem solved. And your mic sounds great. So thanks a lot for taking the extra effort to join us.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
All right. Well, are you going to be at NAB? Any chance you'll be there, or they don't send you?
Sorry, what's that?
Are you going to be at the NAB show in April?
Hard to say. I don't know if we're sending people out to that, but we'll find out, I guess.
All right. Well, if I see you there, great. You take care. Tom Morris has been our guest. He's been here before, and I like Tom. You ought to follow Tom on Facebook. You will get some interesting engineering quandaries and perhaps a fix for them. Thanks a lot to Chris Tarr as well, and thanks to you. We're going to see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Oh, and thanks to Suncast, too. Appreciate you doing a great job of engineering today's show as well. Something that we're going to be adding to This Week in Radio Tech, we're going to post some of the best of segments, the key segments from each hour-long show. We're going to post them in the days following the show. So if you can't catch the whole hour show, you can catch a shorter segment of something really cool. So watch out for that wherever fine podcasts are, on YouTube or on Facebook. With a couple of good places to catch us. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.